It's William Tincup and Ryan Leary. You are listening and watching the You Should Know podcast. Everyone's laughing, which I love. Got Kyle on from Indeed. We're going to be talking about the great disconnect. So, we've already started laughing. We got our laughter out of the way. Now it's time to
Well,
get serious.
we're laughing at you.
I
We're
know, I
laughing
know.
with you. I should say with you.
No,
Yeah,
definitely at.
definitely with this with.
No, definitely at. It's all right. It's all right. I got big shoulders. Kyle, would you do us a favor and introduce yourself and what you do at Indeed?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, good to be here. Love you guys.
100%.
I'm a talent strategy advisor at Indeed. And what that means is essentially I do a lot of what you guys do, only I just don't have a podcast to talk about it. I do a lot of research on the labor market and I understand all the tech that's out there. And I get to help employers kind of skate to where the puck is going and understand the generations of today and hopefully get them to evolve their practices and strategies to hire some good folks.
Do you ever read other people's research, like another vendor? Do you read any of their reports?
All the time. Gartner, LinkedIn, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're a consumer of research as well.
Oh,
So
very much so. Yeah. That's
Nice.
all I do. Podcasts and research, it feels like.
that's fantastic.
Isn't that
Yeah,
a great job to have? Like,
It's
that's just a great
fantastic
career.
job.
What are you
does,
doing today? I'm reading and talking.
Yeah.
But then you're at like a family reunion and that's all you can talk about. And I was like, okay, well, maybe don't go hang out with Uncle Kyle. All he wants to do is talk about the labor market.
He's cool to talk about unemployment and some other stuff and experience and
Jobs not being created in certain industries. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go play basketball now.
yeah.
But wait, growth is slowing. Sorry.
No, but this is really interesting. So it went from 3.8 to 3.9 back to 3.8. But here's what people don't talk about.
Yeah.
You just see everyone check out.
Yeah.
It's when it's when Kyle breaks out the, hey Johnny, look, don't do this in school. Don't go to law school. We're gonna go into humanities. We're gonna talk about history.
So, dude,
we need trade, we need emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Just take me fishing.
Just study empathy. You know, that actually brings up a really interesting point, Ryan. There for a while, you would tell people to go into STEM.
Yes.
That was the advice for a lot of younger people. It's just do STEM, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
It'll all work out. Just do something in STEM. With AI and generative AI, I don't know if that's the best advice. I don't know. I think it'll shake out in time, but I just don't know if you tell people the same thing. So, anyhow, Kyle, would you do us a favor and take us into the idea or the construct of the Great Disconnect?
Yeah, it's that's something that I think a lot of people are already familiar with. There's just a title to it, and it's that there's just a big difference between what employers believe make up a good workplace and what job seekers believe make up a good workplace, and there's a big disconnect. A great one.
Some great disconnect.
The expectations versus reality.
Right. Well, the expectations are different. Period. Just those two vantage points. So before there might have been a similar or shared expectations, if you would. Now the expectations are different. Like I can't remember when we did the podcast, but one of them was Gen Z won't apply to a job if they don't have the salary in it. Whether or not there's state law or not doesn't matter, or federal law, whatever. Whether or not there was law, it's the expectation. So the expectation for the recruiter was like, hey, we're not mandated. We don't have to put it in there because it's a return to office position or it's an office position. So it's inside this place that doesn't have, you don't have to disclose salary requirements. And Gen Z 2 out of 3 not responding, not applying.
Exactly. So up to 3/4 now.
Really?
3/4 are more likely to apply if they see salary, but if they don't, they consider it a red flag, and so they won't. That's why we don't consider pay transparency to be a trend anymore. We call it a standard.
It's a necessity
because it's such a big deal breaker for folks. Yeah.
So what other missed expectations, and again from both sides, from employers, if you have that, and from candidates, let's go through some of those if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, you already touched on one. It's pay transparency. The other one is like lack of flexibility in work. There's a lot of return to office mandates coming from a bunch of different companies, and people are not very happy. There's also a disaster of candidate experiences all over the place that just they take way too long and they ask far too much of job seekers. Like a lot of job seekers are kind of forced to spend a full hour to fill out just an application
Right.
and do an assessment and like have a bunch of unpaid labor.
Let me ask. So let's go through these as you go through them. So you're in Austin.
Mhm.
Indeed has an office, a beautiful office in Austin.
I agree.
If it was, and it won't be, but if it was mandated that you needed to go back 5, 6 days a week, whatever the bit is, I'm not asking if you would quit or to get another job. I'm
Be
asking,
careful how you answer.
Yeah.
would it change your outlook
Oh,
on your?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Because
You,
I got this job during the pandemic, so it was 2021, and
so
it was fully remote position from the
right,
get-go, and I do travel a little bit, but
right, right. Of
you
course.
know, I get to hang out at home with my dog. My wife, she actually also probably a better story. She was hired as a remote employee, and her office did ask them to come back 3 days a week, and then coming up here shortly, they want them to go back 5 days a week. So she put in her notice.
Yeah,
She's just like it
Nice.
just doesn't work for her.
not gonna do
And
that.
yeah,
Wow.
so yeah, it's a big deal because I mean cars are expensive,
Right.
commutes aren't fun,
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
and a lot
no.
of times the folks who invite you to the office, there's nothing different between the office and your home other than
No.
you're less comfortable and you have to be a little
Right.
bit more extroverted possibly, but
Mhm.
they don't really give you the time to really connect with the
Yeah,
you know,
that's the lie. Oh well, that's one of the. I don't want to say that it's an explicit lie. I think they really believe it. Some of the people that are championing RTO, they believe soft skills can be developed or developed more fully in an office environment. Let's jump in here. Let's do a design shred. Let's brainstorm. Let's get to meet each other in sales. Let's go do a bunch of objection response stuff together and see each other. You can do it on Zoom or whatever, but it's just not as intense. It's just not as good. And then you end up at the office and you don't do that.
yeah.
And so it's like you know,
Mm-mm. No,
I
what's going
mean,
to happen is you go to the office, you can't get your system to connect. The
yeah,
guy from IT is at home working remotely, so you've got to track that person down. It's a mess. Yeah.
ugh,
Why can't Kyle? Why, I don't know if you're seeing this or having this conversation with others, but why why can't organizations just survive with a hybrid model? Why are they fighting this?
real
Um,
estate cost.
real estate. That seems to be the answer for most
So
of the
they've already got it.
yeah, most of
No,
the
no,
companies
yeah,
I've
they
spoken to.
go ahead, go.
I was just gonna say, most of the companies I've spoken to, like
Mhm.
their HR leaders, CHROs, they all say that it's because they own some buildings and they have
100%.
7 year leases, and they have to use that. It's an asset of theirs, and
So
uh,
they could get out of it during the pandemic. They could get out of it, and they could get out of a lot of those lease payments because of force majeure. It's out of their hands. It's God's will, or etc. Once that ended, they had to pay those leases. So
Right.
there's in large what happened if you signed 2019, you signed a 7 year lease. Then all of a sudden you go through COVID. Those years they didn't pay.
Right.
The problem is they also extended the contract. So
Right. It
while you're
got
not
tacked
paying,
on. Right.
it got tacked on.
Right. But what's the difference, though? I mean, you're going to pay for it regardless. So why
It's the
not?
second business outside of talent. Talent's always the largest expense in a business.
And if
Second
you're going to
largest,
lose that talent
real
from
estate.
forcing them in the office, why not just,
Well,
all good
right?
questions, Ryan. All
all good
Yeah.
questions.
Right.
All good
Right.
questions. All
I'm
good
not letting my
questions.
thought go here. I'm going to
No,
win.
no. If the CF, I really believe if the CFOs could get out of those leases, because it's not just the lease of the space, it's all that stuff inside of it.
Well, yeah,
And air
sure.
conditioning, electric, all this stuff that's there. And indeed, in a great example, they have a fantastic space, fantastic building, cafeteria. Dude, you want for nothing. You go inside that thing, and it's just like shit. I want fettuccine alfredo, and it's done. They'll make it. Like it is intense. So they've got all of that stuff. So I mean, you can kind of see it, but if they could get out of that cost, like if the commercial
Sure.
brokers would let them out of that cost, we wouldn't be having this discussion around flexibility.
Yeah, I definitely think that real estate's the biggest, like one of the biggest reasons why
One
folks
of the big,
should say it. The
Hmm.
other one is that a lot of folks that are in leadership belong to a certain generation who are
100%.
not familiar with how to build relationships online,
Yep.
whereas the younger generations are very familiar with how to build relationships online. So it's they're speaking two different languages when it's like, well, we can have community over Zoom if we wanted to, and the
Right.
leaders don't know what that looks like, because
Right.
they didn't grow up in that world, and so part of that disconnect.
Let
And
me.
It's almost the opposite
two different groups of work.
because if you go to boomers and Gen Z, so let's do the farthest we can. Boomers don't know how to build a relationship online. Gen Z has the opposite problem. They have difficulty building relationships
Mm.
offline.
Sure.
That's the difficulty for them. So you can kind of see those two, and like millennials and Gen X are in the middle of that. They've got some of them that cross over. But yeah, I can see that being a disconnect. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, no, you covered it. That was my question.
Fair enough. All right. So you went after you went through the disconnect of okay, hybrid or flexibility as you called it. So the first thing is or one of the first things was transparency. Then
Flexibility.
flexibility. What's the next one? Because you were getting
Uh,
into them, you were listing them off, and I'm like,
yeah,
whoa.
the candidate experiences, what it's like to apply to a job, and what it's like to even just go through the interview process. It's like an Indiana Jones adventure. Sometimes you gotta swap the medallion. You gotta run down the thing. You gotta dodge darts.
Bullets or one of
Hmm.
those darts.
Yeah,
Darts are
it's
going past you.
there's a big company that I worked with. You've heard of them, and I was showing them through their candidate experience and how bad it was. It took me 52 minutes to get through an entry level position application because they had two different assessments that I had to take to determine whether or not I was qualified for an entry level position. And obviously, they're checking the candidates for like personality and culture and those types of things. But if you're thinking about it from the job seeker's perspective, which is something
It's
that,
entry level.
yeah, it's entry level, and
Yeah.
they have very little time to apply to many roles. And they're trying to apply to dozens of jobs in one sitting, and one
Was that
company taking
particular?
up a full hour of their time, it seems a
Never.
bit disrespectful. Yeah.
Hmm.
How many TikTok videos is that? Let's see. Let's do the math. No.
60.
So
He's done the math.
I mean, and if they're 30 seconds, it's 120. God, there's
Yeah.
no way that
Oh God.
changes my entire day. Was that mobile friendly? Do you remember if that experience
Oh
was?
no, that one was not mobile friendly. So that, yeah, added injury there.
My God.
Yeah, and so that's a big piece is that when employers are thinking about the job seeker experience, they get it. They're like, yeah, of course we don't want to put too many barriers in front of someone
Right.
because high quality candidates aren't going to spend a full hour filling out an application. They've got too many things to do. But it takes a special person at the employer to raise that flag. Until that flag
I,
is raised, they're just continuing on with pre-COVID
what
traditions.
worked before? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think it's also that generation is what at least I feel like if you want to go after Gen Z and you want to heavily recruit Gen Z, you need people in Gen Z designing the process and also meeting them at the gate.
Yeah.
And that way they see somebody that they know or they see somebody that's like them. They can answer questions, but they understand that process better. They can explain, why they did certain things.
Hmm.
Have you read or seen anything about candidates expecting if you're going to ask me for something, not only tell me, but tell me why and give me something. So I'll give you an example. In the background screening world, what some of the players have done is yes, the background check is for the employer check, but what they do is they flip it and they also give a copy of the background check to the applicant.
Mm.
And so they basically say, "Hey, listen, have you ever wondered like what these reports are like? You know, do we have your permission to do a background check?" And you'll get a copy. Well, then it's like you check that off, like, "Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I'd like to see what's on that report." So, like, I think that people don't do that with like assessments. Like a personality assessment isn't a big deal. It's a big deal because the person doesn't know what they're getting for that investment, that time. Have
Well,
you have
it's
you tried
also
any of that?
It's also, even if they were to get it back, they don't necessarily
Right.
know what the company is looking for.
Right.
Because it'll put you in a bucket of some sort, whether it's Meyer-Briggs or DISC or any of
Right.
these. Paradox has some, so it'll put you in a bucket. So you'll be like, oh, I'm in bucket A.
But
Did
they
I
don't
get
What
the
does
tell you
that
that.
mean?
job? Like,
Bucket A was the rejections. Got
Yeah,
right,
it.
but
Cool.
right.
Thank you.
what could make it? Well, what could make? I'm trying to make it work. What could make that work is if they told you what that position usually is,
Yeah, I think that would be really nice.
or the
Um,
cultural overlay for the company, or something like that.
but then you might be like introducing some bias into how someone fills out an
Right.
assessment. I, at least speaking from my own personal
Right.
experience,
Right.
is that if I know that they're looking for ducks and I'm very much a chicken, I'm going to
Well,
fill
you're
out the
ducks.
assessment as if I'm a duck.
100%.
You're gonna
percent
I,
quack.
I need a job. I'm going to
That's
quack.
fair. Yeah. 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 No, that's fair.
So it's a tough it's a tough boat to put people in and expect them to row the entire way.
Yeah.
We've
The other as you were so William, you were talking about you need
ducks
Gen X in the
in the process.
position to
Right.
hire in the
Yeah.
process, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't that introduce, and Kyle, I'll ask you, doesn't that introduce potential ageism into the mix as well, or bias there? You're specifically putting someone of a generation in a position to create a process to hire people of a position and exclude other people. Although I fully agree with
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
we're saying.
Yeah, no,
What?
I think you're right. There's definitely some risk there. I wouldn't say that like you necessarily need a Gen Z or a millennial in order to think like a Gen Z or a millennial. Really, you just need some empathy. You just need to understand what someone is going through and what the
Right.
climate looks like, which
Right.
there's plenty of information out there to give someone that mindset. But that's really all we need is more emotionally intelligent leaders to consider the experience of those who they're trying to attract, and
Well,
that
to your
will.
point earlier, we used to think of candidates. I think there's still a lot of leaders that think of candidates as a faucet. You turn on the faucet, candidates come. And so if you want to put them through a 30-minute interview process or application process, really what you're
Mm,
talking about, or 50-minute or 10-minute, does we dictate.
Yeah.
And the thing is the talent has changed to such a degree to where you don't dictate. Even in a shortage where there's scarcity of talent, you don't dictate. Still, and
yeah.
that's the emotional intelligence and empathy that you're talking about. You got to care about what they're going through and how they go through this experience. And if you do that, you have a decent chance of getting them. If you don't, you don't.
Yeah, well, then you introduce also speed, velocity, right? On
Yeah,
the dynamics of the actual job market itself. So companies lower their standards all the time to move faster. Now you're introducing non-quality candidates
right.
accepting volume to get to what you hope is quality.
One of the things that we advise companies on is you can move fast and still get good quality as long as you are transparent and authentic in like job ads or with your employer brand. As long as you're
100%.
Yeah,
genuine, that's the thing that I think is
yeah.
the biggest learning opportunity for folks is that, especially the younger generations that grew up with the
Mm,
internet. This I think this is the case for most folks who are somewhat media literate, is that they can kind of see through the corporate BS and
Yeah,
job ads. And
yeah. Uh,
yeah, if they're not being authentic, if they're not talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly, then
yeah.
it will be more difficult for them to attract folks.
that's right.
So Kyle, yesterday, I forget what prompted this, what our exercise we were doing. We started looking at Craigslist. It was another episode. We were recording something, and Craigslist came up somehow. And so I went on the Craigslist. I'm like, how is Craigslist still here? Like, what's
Ryan,
the
Ryan
deal?
didn't believe it still existed.
Well,
I
I know it
said,
existed. I just couldn't believe that it's actually still a
used as a
major.
job.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So I went into all the jobs and I'm looking at all the local jobs of companies that I know that are within 5 minutes of my home. And I went to their Indeed postings. I went to their LinkedIn
to
postings. I
find
went to
the
these
same
other
posting.
to find the same post. they don't exist. And so
No.
they'll have a posting on Indeed or LinkedIn or somewhere else, and it's like a posting. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the biggest BS like you'll find.
Sure.
Craigslist, legit. I'll have to send you some of these things. They were 4 or 5 lines. If you like this, you will do well here. We pay this. If you don't like this, no need to apply.
So
Like,
our favorite one, Kyle, you'll go North Philly.
uh,
It said North Philly securities on premise will have you out by 3. Like
No, it didn't say by 3. It said It
daylight.
said yes, comma, you will be out before nighttime because it's not in such a secure area. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that is genius.
That's what they
That
led
now
with. That's what they led with.
that is
Security is on
communication.
premise. You'll be out with
Yeah.
daylight.
They're not
Okay.
hiding the fact it's not a secure place. Everybody knows it. Like, you don't
Right.
go there and live there if
Right.
you don't. You know this,
Right.
and that was their opening line. Yes, you will. Yes, there is security on premise. Yes, comma, you will be out before evening
But
or something
to
like that.
Kyle's point, that's authentic. That's authentic.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's not getting into the capabilities and what we're looking at in a job and what you're going to get at the business. That's none of that stuff. It's like
Yeah.
what are the two fears that they have
Yeah.
in North Philly in this particular region for that particular job? It's like, listen, are you worried about how long it's going to take the police to get to a certain place? Yeah, you don't have to worry about that. We have
Right.
security on premise. Two,
Yeah.
you're not going to have to go out in the dark.
There was no
And so,
disconnect there.
yeah,
Like,
there was no.
they
I don't.
answered your questions up front.
I don't know if they even got to any of the other stuff.
No, well, it had the pay rate and it had the
Yeah,
hours. And
yeah,
what was the other one said? Oh, it said prepare. It said here for or plan to be here for up to 4 hours for a trial shift and
yeah.
to start the next day or something like that. And
Oh,
I was like,
Super
that is
easy.
fantastic.
genius.
That's all we're asking for. Is just some
That's
Yeah,
options.
it.
That's
yeah,
it.
And
yeah.
and that
Yeah.
particular and people, there are a bunch of people on Indeed that do this right. I mean, you got a grade because of so
Yeah.
much data that you're sitting on, so many jobs that you're sitting on. You got some people that do it right. And so the cool thing is you can point to them and say, listen, don't cut and copy this. Don't do that because you've got a unique DNA. You've got unique things that make you okay.
Mhm.
But look at this job, and it says, hey, we have a roller skating rink, we have this, we have that, but we're going to work 100 hours a week. It's one of these, it's a shark infested waters. Okay, but you're going to work. Work is your life is your work, etc. We're not going to say we're a family, we're not a family, it's work.
Yep.
Now, if you read that and that's not you, you just go to the next thing.
Yeah.
So
No,
that's where
no
you
harm,
get
no foul.
no harm.
Yeah.
Exactly. You've added no noise to the recruiters as well because you're just not going to apply. It's like, even if I get that job, I don't want that job.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
Kyle, where does tech and process come into this? Where does tech play a role?
yeah, it's a great
For
question.
the candidate experience piece,
Yeah,
yeah. I actually just did a webinar around like AI in the hiring process. I think the big thing that's gonna really possibly surprise people is that it's going to take care of the searching piece for a lot of
right,
recruiters. Because it's
right,
already good and for job seekers, like we're
yeah,
already have a pretty good algorithm to help folks find a relevant job. But for employers, like we're going to take out all of the searching so they can focus more on the human connection and that and telling an authentic story. So I think like technology is going to go in that direction is like getting rid of like, all the operational duties that
right.
recruiters are currently doing, including writing job ads to a degree, and allow them to just focus on the human connection, which is probably the most important piece about human resources is the human
Hmm.
part, right?
Human, the H, yeah,
Yeah. But I think it'll help employers really quickly identify like, oh, this talent seems like it would be good for you because they prefer these things and that falls in line with what you expect from your culture. And
Right.
so,
do you have a personal take on recruiters being a candidate advocate or an employer advocate?
ooh, good question. Yeah, I've listened to lots of podcasts that say they have to be 50-50.
I agree with that
I'm
for a moment. Yeah,
I'm of the belief that they should be candidate focused. I might be a little bit biased. I'm working for a company whose mission it is to help people get jobs, not help people find workers. Um,
right.
But yeah, like the candidates, I think that's the soul of the business. That's the people of it. So if you're not
Yeah.
solely focused on the inbound talent that's coming through those doors, and making sure that they are placed in a good team and that they understand what the culture is like, then you're just setting everybody up for failure for the
Yeah,
future.
what else? What's your job at
Right.
that point? In fact, I think the recruiters that say this isn't for you or this hiring manager is not
Much
for
better.
you, you're a great fit, but just not for this job. And they don't mean it in that way. They mean it like that team, that boss, that circumstance is not going to be good for you. You're not going to win. It's an
Yeah.
untenable, unwinnable game. Did you have some, before we went into that, did you have some more disconnects?
Just one
Probably
more.
have a lot. All right, what do you got?
And it's something that we've kind of already been talking about. It's just that like a reputation precedes an employer like experience. So job seekers talk, and especially Gen Z folks, but like a lot of job seekers tell their friends, don't apply to Acme Brick. That's a real company. Don't apply to company A because they put me through the ringer for 6 weeks and then ghosted me. And they take note of some of that really bad, what some would call toxic behavior, and they tell all of their friends, and none of their friends will apply. And so this has a big trickle down effect in terms of like how you treat candidates. So that's another big
Yeah,
disconnect. I don't know if employers really realize that they do have reputations, and they
right.
should focus a lot on their employer brand and being as authentic as they can, so that way there are no surprises.
And ratings are a two-way street. Like Van, my youngest son was asking me about this yesterday. He's like, "Can you cancel a ride in the middle of a ride?"
Mm.
And I'm like, "No. Once they pick you up, you've sussed that out. First of all, they have your bank account information,
Yeah.
but you've already sussed that out." Because he was fascinated with basically, okay, they've accepted your ride, so the driver has accepted you, you've accepted them. Okay, so there's a mutual. They're around the block. They pick you up. Once they've picked you up, we're agreed. They're going to take you to a
Yeah.
place. However, they've got ratings. If you act in a terrible way in the car,
Right.
they've got ratings for you. And if they act terrible in the car, you've got ratings for them. So there's a mechanism there. And I can see the candidates have been doing with your sister company, Glassdoor. The candidates have and employees have always had a way to kind of talk about like their experience, which is
Yeah.
great. I want to get to a point where recruiters have ratings. I know that recruiters are going to hate this, by the way. However,
I'm sure they will.
I'm sure they're going to hate it. However, and hiring managers too. If I had my druthers, it would be both. It'd be everyone. If you touch talent and in the candidate experience, you have ratings,
Well,
so
they
that
do
we
that
can.
for CEOs and executives, right? Why couldn't we do that for recruiters and hiring managers?
Yeah.
But dude, now I know that I'm dealing with a 1.2 instead of a 5 star.
Hmm.
Like if I know if I'm dealing with a 1.5, first of all, why are they still there? If they're a
Right.
1.2, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Because it would again, bad people are gonna act bad no
Yeah.
matter what you do. You're always
Do you
gonna have
want to
bad
go to the
players.
Luxor or the Win? Your choice. Like you have the option. Kyle, are you seeing a difference between larger enterprise mega corporations and the local
Biggest,
companies
yeah.
in the disconnect in terms of the example you gave, for example, friends will give you bad reviews, or friends will not refer other friends to apply if you treat them poorly. So a local mom and pop, say dry cleaners or a restaurant or, a supermarket that's local, as opposed to a Nike store. Are you seeing a difference there?
Well, there's short answer is no, because the smaller the store, they can of course turn on a dime. So if they needed to shift how they do things and how they operate, it's much easier for them to do so. But they
Right.
don't have as much access to information that some of the larger companies might.
Hmm.
So these larger companies might have more data in terms of what works and doesn't work for them, because they, of course, have larger volumes, but it's
Right.
much harder for them to turn that large monster
Mm-hmm.
uh, to shift their practices, right? So, yeah, in terms of like how they manage talent, I see the same common misconceptions, no matter what the size of the company. It could be a small franchise
Right.
versus it could be a gigantic global corporation, and they both say the exact same thing.
100%.
Where it's like we don't understand what's going on, or we don't understand how fast we can like, or how quickly we can make these changes.
Got it.
It's like that old thing, friends don't let friends drink and drive. Friends don't let friends apply to company X. I think the thing for me is the authenticity is the hardest for me. I think it's the hardest algebra to solve for these companies is because they have a really terrible culture and they know it, or they're in the midst of changing their culture, and so their culture is aspirational. It's not what they are now; it's what they would like to be, and they have a hard time telling that story. And in the case of it being a terrible culture, they have a hard time telling that story because they want to tell a story over here that's magical, and everyone has a happy ending. And in this story over here, and the truth isn't that way. So then you recruit the people based on being on inauthentic. They get in, they stay for a little while, they earn a paycheck or two, maybe they stay a while longer, and they're really looking to leave because you lied to them. This has all been based on a lie. So, Kyle, how do you teach people to be authentic?
Uh, uh, it's really teaching folks how to listen than it is how to be
Mm,
authentic.
okay.
Um, because most of the companies that I've worked with, they don't know what their culture is. Like, if you were to ask
Mm,
them, like, how would you describe your culture as if it were a personality? How would you describe it? And
right.
you just start looking at each other because they don't really know. And I don't think
Hmm.
it's ever been defined for them in a lot of cases. Um, or if it has been defined, there's a very small overlap of Venn diagram. Those who
Right.
haven't, it's not defined, and those who are acting on a set of values or a mission statement. And there's a very small sliver of companies that do both, uh, that know it and act on it all the time. And those are usually the companies that are considered cult brands, right? The ones that engender so much loyalty from their customers as well as their employees.
Right.
It's to get to the point of understanding what the culture is, like they just have to listen to their employees. And most companies that I've talked to, they only pull on one lever to really understand how their folks feel, and they do engagement surveys,
Right.
or pulse surveys. And I don't know, the big issue with those is that folks never believe that they're fully anonymous. So
This is
100%.
um,
true.
so they're not going to be truthful in terms of being critical about who they work for and where they work and the friction between them and their best work. So all of these internal surveys that folks are like living and breathing, they're always more positive than they actually
100%. Love my boss.
reality. Yeah.
Love the
Yeah.
team.
Yeah.
CEO's vision's amazing. Yep, yep, yep. Checks off.
That's why I like the well. You can't do this unless you're in the office, really anonymous, unless they have cameras watching it. But the little bathroom sensors, right? The
Mood.
green face, the red, right? You just
Yeah,
tap the button and you move on. I
Yeah.
love those things. Like I tap them all the time, and then I
yeah.
get yelled at because I touched the dirty thing
Dude,
from my
I'm
supervisor.
so terrible with those things, especially at airports where I'll just keep pushing buttons. I'll just stand in front of it and push all the buttons because I feel like
Yeah,
there's a lot
yeah.
of people that
Like a
walk
screw
by.
ninja or
But if
something.
I have to do that at
Exactly.
home or if I have to do that somewhere, they're gonna track me. Like I
Yeah,
feel like
yeah.
they're gonna track me. Yeah. Like I'm. Yeah.
Yeah. So like what we advise employers to pull on more than one lever to understand how
Right.
their folks
Hmm.
are doing. And then give them like an actual safe environment to speak their mind. And the companies that do this the best are doing stay interviews.
Yeah.
And the stay interviews are always conducted by someone that is not in the chain of command of the person being interviewed. So
Right.
it's never
Right.
someone's manager or manager's manager.
Yeah. Why are
For
you here? Why
it.
why why is this interesting to you? Yeah.
Yeah, and just say like, "What do you need to stay here for another year?" And you just let them talk, and they will tell you everything that they need in order to stay for another.
100%.
And
Yeah.
those are some of the more authentic ways to understand and listen to the culture and see what folks need. And then obviously, like external reviews is another lever that folks pull on, but they don't necessarily think that any of those are truthful. It's like, well, if someone's super critical about you externally,
Right.
And that means that they don't feel
Hmm.
like they have a place internally to actually share these feelings. So I wouldn't necessarily think that they're lying, but rather they're finally getting something off of their chest. So we should be listening to them with the same intensity that we listen to engagement surveys.
No.
So, do you, and again, this is all kind of a work in progress. Where is culture derived? Is it because a lot of people put it in HR, or
Mm.
they put it at the C-suite? Sometimes they put it, the examples was famously, they put it at the office, the receptionist,
Hmm.
and they put it at the employee level that basically culture comes from. So you've got come from the top, come from the bottom, or come from somebody, a culture czar in HR. What's your working thesis right now? Where does culture come from?
So the what I'm about to say comes from I spent a lot of time. I worked at Apple for 5 years, and then
Cool.
I went and I studied companies like Ritz Carlton and Starbucks and Disney. And so what I found was that culture really comes from the people, right? And each department is going to be slightly different in
Right.
how they act, but that's essentially what the culture is. But from the top down, those are like that's the values, that's the mission, that's the purpose. So if you don't have a purpose statement, then you've got all these different mini cultures, the subcultures,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
going in completely different directions.
Right.
If you have one North Star, then everybody is together in what their pursuit is. But my biggest finding or my biggest belief is that fish rot from the head.
Yeah.
So you can have one of the best cultures on the planet, and everybody loves working with each other. But if you have one toxic leader, everyone that works underneath them
Right.
hates their job.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
Kyle, I was gonna ask this before William did, and you kind of answered it, but I'll maybe go deeper on it. When you study these companies and you're seeing that they have different cultures or a variation of what the initial culture potentially is in the different departments, is that based? I've always had this feeling that it's been built on the hiring manager itself. So if there's a hiring manager in, I don't know, we'll call it the engineering department, and they're doing all the hiring and they're doing it free will. They don't have gloves on or, cuffs on or anything. And they're hiring their own people who are like them, people they like, people that have their potential, in their mind, potential for them. Aren't they in a sense building their own culture from department to department to department? So that's kind of where I've always laid culture for companies like you're describing that have a variation of culture in all of these different departments. I've always looked at it as the hiring manager setting that culture, right or wrong.
Hmm.
That's just kind of how I always felt about it.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong at all. I think that's right. There's a small evolution, I think, that's happening though with
Hmm.
companies that are trying to be more equitable and inclusive,
Right.
um,
Right. Yeah.
as part of their values or even part of their mission. So from the top down, it says, we don't want you to hire people that are exactly like you. We want you
Right.
to go outside of your comfort zone of talent and look
Yeah.
for diverse voices. When managers or middle managers are given that kind of directive, then I think that opens up the that idea of just
Hmm.
folks just hiring folks like themselves. But again, that has to come from their leadership as well. And if that's not something that is thought of at the senior leadership level, then I think
Hmm.
what you said is exactly what's going to take place is that you've got
If they've
straight white
set
men hiring straight white men.
if the board
Yeah.
has set forth and the C-suite has set forth values, vision, and purpose, even in that scenario, Ryan, where people are hiring kind of their own culture,
Hmm.
they're still doing, they should be still doing it within
Up
those
to.
constructs.
Right.
Right. So I think this is one of the misnomers in our industry is that there isn't one culture. It's cultures plural. Kyle said it. It's all these different types of cultures. You got a New York sales office, and
Very
you've got a
different. Yeah.
New Zealand sales office. Those they're still selling. They're still doing certain things within the process that are exactly the same. But to say that they behave in the same way is that's not true.
No.
So I can kind of see that. I think it's again that the fish rotting deal is it's really a great example of thinking about. Okay, listen, if it's up here, it's going to eventually be rotten everywhere.
Damn.
It's just a question of time. So this great disconnect. Let's. how do we shore this up? So now let's fix it.
Yeah,
Spend
it's
a
just
couple months.
the world's problem.
You've got 30
We'll do.
seconds, Kyle.
We're
Go.
we're gonna do poverty, and we're gonna serve hunger after that. Anyhow, well, what's your because you're advising clients on these things, so you are trying to help them fix things. So what's your go-to? So you explain here are the disconnects, and it's like okay, resolution because you need resolution on these things. Where do you start?
Yeah, an authentic employer brand is up there as kind of a leading solution for a lot of
Right,
this, telling folks exactly what type of culture, exactly what type of environment that they can expect, even if it doesn't seem super attractive. That's okay.
right,
Like,
right,
people value or respect the transparency more so than the perfect work condition. So that's number one. Number two is like also just give your employees a choice. I don't know if y'all are familiar with the longest running study on happiness is the Harvard study of
yeah,
human development.
yeah,
Um, they found that choice was the number one determining factor behind
shocking,
someone's happiness. And so if someone feels like they do better work at home, give them the option to do so. And if they feel like they do better work in the office, give them the option to do so. And just allowing adults to make their own decisions on where they're going to do their best work and how they're going to do their best work.
right,
Obviously, you need to, as a business, need to create some goals surrounding that. But there are certain worlds where there's no reason why we need to force someone into a car for 2 hours a day. It doesn't make that business any more money if they're in a car for 2 hours a day. Um,
right.
it definitely makes the employee less likely to be happy when they're at work if they're forced to go into an office. So it
Hmm.
Because it's both sides. It's the commute too is dread because of traffic, and the commute home is frustration because of traffic.
right.
Traffic commute. You know what I'm saying? Like you hit them twice in one day.
And
And it's
then
usually that commute home that really irks the
Oh,
hell
dude,
out of you. I
you,
mean, like,
you
you're
just
done.
ended you could have ended a great day.
Yeah.
You could have had a really cool day, did a bunch of cool stuff, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden you get in your car, and Austin has terrible
yeah,
traffic problems,
Austin's a
right?
specific
Yeah, it's a specific. It's really LA kind of ish traffic. Like it doesn't matter. Like in
Mm.
Dallas, okay, 7 to 9 is a little bit tough. Okay, 4 to about 6, get a little bit tough. But other than that, it's pretty easy to get places in
Right.
Dallas.
Right.
In Austin, you could be there at 11 on a Saturday night, and it's locked down.
yeah.
It is insane. Like LA, you can just be out on the 5, and all of a sudden it's like, why is this a parking lot? I don't understand. But to your point, Kyle, you hit them twice. They're dreading that. I
Hmm.
gotta go sit in that. Yeah, I gotta go sit in that traffic, and then at the end of the day, even a great day, you hit them with the frustration on the way home.
Well, and not to mention like getting ready to go to work. That's a
Good point.
whole nother hour at least
Hmm.
before you even get
Oh
in the
yeah.
car. So that's
Oh yeah.
2 hours in the morning just to work. And you're not getting paid, of course, for any of that. And then another hour to get home. And so
Yeah.
yeah, so giving folks a choice
Flexibility.
because some
Yeah.
people do prefer to be in office, and I love that for them. They should
Yeah.
definitely
Hmm.
have that
100%.
option. And then the last little like if we were to solve all the world's problems is
As we are.
reduce as many barriers as you possibly can between getting someone to apply to your jobs. Like, there's no reason why we need them to jump through so many hoops. A lot of employers are so worried about not finding the perfect candidate, but the perfect candidate is going to choose you if you're authentic about the environment and the workspace that you're going to be providing for them.
And you
So
didn't waste their
that's the
time.
perfect candidate, the one that has agreed to work with you, even
Yeah.
through
Hmm.
some of the unattractive language that you might share with them. That's the perfect candidate. So those are the three main things I would love for employers to start considering going forward.
Dude, great advice. Absolutely great advice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kyle, carving out time, helping us, helping the audience. This has just been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you all. Very, very big fans of you guys.